My name is Gwen. I'm a compulsive overeater, bulimic. I weigh and measure 3 meals a day from the gray sheet, commit them to my sponsor. I don't eat no matter what. It's the most important thing in my life without exception. I feel very honored to speak, to be here. And so a funny story, my sponsor and I had a talk, I guess it was Saturday. And, I got abstinent at a very different point in my life. I was just out of college, just starting out in my life. And now here I am with pretty busy family life, working, blah, 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 what we all do. But my point is my sponsor and I, sponsors sponsor the food, and they also look out for the things that we don't see. Because, I know everything. I have 30 years. I run this, I run that. But she called me out on a few things. Service, not calling on time. Some things I want to be like, really? Are we in preschool? Come on, like the pride, right? And, she did it in a loving, gentle, strong way. And I'm so grateful that I have a sponsor that tells me the truth, that's known me for 30 years, has been there through everything. So you think she'd be like, Gwen's good, but we watch out for each other. So as we hung up that day, she said, I committed to, she gave me someone's number in Connecticut that she thinks was involved in collecting the names for the next cycle to do service on a Zoom meeting. And I said, I'm calling now because I won't call tomorrow because I will forget. I get very busy and I forget. The only thing I truly remember to do is breathe because I don't have to think about it and weigh and measure my food. Everything else, I have to write things down, reminders, whatever. So I hung up the phone and I called this person. She put me down on the list. She told me the week that they start to open it up. So I got that on my calendar. And at the same time, some other GreySheeters were there, and this GreySheeter got on the phone. Oh, was that Gwen? Gets on the phone. We need a speaker this Monday at 4:00 for the Ireland meeting. I'm like, all right, God, I get it. You do what your sponsor says. You take suggestion, you don't delay, and here I am. And for me at 4:00, this is kind of the worst time of day, like, violin, like I was picking up the boys at the various activities, and I must have told them 10 times, guys, be on time. I got to get home for a Zoom. So they're older. They're 17 and 13 almost. They're like, Mom's got to get home for a Zoom. Hey, Mike, did you know Mom has to get home for a Zoom? So I'm just so glad that, it's just an example how this program is a day at a time. And a day at a time, I do what my sponsor says. And when I don't want to do what my sponsor says, I don't call on time because I'll get her voicemail, and I'm glad that texting wasn't around when I first started because I would have hid behind that. Still do. But anyway, so how did I get here? I always loved food. I always used food to soothe myself. I always use food to stuff myself, to avoid feelings. It's the way I'm hardwired. It's the way I'm brought up. I'm also an alcoholic. So I got both, but and that's the other thing my sponsor said to me. I'm pretty active in my local AA group, and I'm very active in my church. And these are all great things, but we had like a mini inventory, like where is GreySheet and all this, I'm like, GreySheet's the program I do the most work for, but I need to be in the middle of the herd. So in high school, I, binge purged. No, didn't purge it. Did a lot of binging. And then I had this nice cycle of cigarettes, alcohol, weed, guys, drama. And it would just, it kept the wheels of addiction turning, and nothing was too out of control except in between the ears, right? And then I went off to college. The drinking got worse, and I went to a therapist, by the time I was, I guess, junior year, sophomore year. And she goes, it seems like you just binge when you drink. So why don't you stop drinking? I'm like, oh, okay. My dad's the alcoholic. I'm not the alcoholic. So sure. And then I realized I had a problem with alcohol. All I thought about was the drink, why I couldn't have the drink. How am I going to get and because I thought that lady was a quack. Meanwhile, she planted the seed. She, you know, and so I got into AA. I was sent to OA because I had she wasn't my best friend at the time, but the woman I told about my eating, wouldn't you know it, the one person that God put in front of me when I was willing to admit to another person, her sister was in Gray Sheet. Her other sister was in Gray Sheet. I didn't know this. I wouldn't have talked to her probably. So I saw what we both went to our first OA meeting together because she wasn't in Gray Sheet yet. She didn't want to go to Gray Sheet. And anyway, she soon went off to Gray Sheet because she knew what Gray Sheet abstinence was. I didn't. So I stayed in OA. I actually got a little, better. I learned a lot. I surrendered to a food plan, but no one sponsored the food plan. So I was still controlling the food plan. And that was in the early 90s when they had done away with food plans. Now they're coming a little full circle, whatever. So lo and behold, I graduated college and I actually had like good grades by then. I was failing the first year. But I wasn't drinking and I wasn't binging all the time. The food was a little cleaner, but all I thought about was that one snack that I was allowed to have, the metabolic. It wasn't a snack. And that's all I thought about all day. I didn't think about the protein. I didn't think about the vegetable. I thought about that carb/protein metabolic. Graduated college, went back to my home and, I was back in the fire. Quickly fell apart without the support of that friend and visiting Gray Sheet meetings. And finally, December 1992, I could not work. I could not think about, doing anything but binge. All I wanted to do was binge. And now I was up to throwing up about, 8 times a day on an average. And then all of a sudden, I couldn't get the gag reflex anymore. And for a bulimic, that was very scary. So I didn't come here because I gained 200 pounds. I didn't come here because I was crazy. I was crazy, but I got scared. Like, I can't throw up anymore. And all of a sudden I started gaining weight, like literally by the day. Right. Anyway, I went to the city. I walked in a meeting and I'd been to that meeting before. They knew me as so-and-so's friend, and I walked in the meeting and that woman's sister, who was the sister who was in Gray Sheet, she was celebrating her, 11th year of abstinence. And I walked in and I looked at her and she looked at me and I'm like, just started bawling, like, I'm here, and I'm so grateful. I was looking for peace. I was looking for serenity. I was looking to stop eating and binging, but I wasn't looking for Gray Sheet. But it's what I need and what I do. So I got some days together, but my day one is January 13th, 1993. And I'm grateful for going through life, going through job interviews, going through dating, going through, I didn't always love being 20 and sober and abstinent. I don't think it was, I got a big book for my 21st birthday, like, ho hum, you're boring, but I did try to stay close to the young people in the program. And I was never like a real, I like small groups, so I wasn't like I needed to be at whatever, but I stayed abstinent. It was the most important thing. I went on job interviews in between breakfast and lunch. I worked in between lunch and dinner. Everything was in between my meals. I called my sponsor. I got to meetings. I sponsored, and then, here I am a day at a time, been through, in fact, the call that, the situation that preceded the call that I had with my sponsor last week. 2 weeks ago, I got, I thought it was a virus, but food poisoning, like 12 hours of just everything in my system coming up. And you would think bulimic, I don't mind throwing up. I hate throwing up, especially when you're really, really sick. So I was really out of it for a day. And I just left it to my husband and my son. Like, he knows my sponsor. I'm like, please just call her. I can't. So she wasn't saying that was the problem. But when I started to feel better, it wasn't like I wasn't so, or I'm like, oh, it'll be okay. So, you know, even being very sick, the minute I came out of sleeping for 8 hours, thank you. Um, I needed to forget about everything else and focus on my abstinence. I am abstinent. I was abstinent, but the willingness started to get confused with being sick, right? It's just like when I had 3 pregnancies. When you're pregnant, your food changes a little bit in Gray Sheet. You do it under the guidelines of a sponsor. No, I don't get carbs or anything. It's all Gray Sheet, but you know, some of the amounts have to change, you know. Towards the end, there's no room for food, like, you know, that kind of stuff. And then once the kids start to grow up, I still had some of these bad habits, because when you have a, you know, a toddler that falls and has a bloody, you know, needs stitches at the hospital, and you're halfway through a meal, you attend to the child. You have to leave, you know, you cover the meal, you attend to the child, and you call your sponsor and you get back to the meal. But there's those interruptions that happen. And then as they get older, like it would just become like a bad habit, getting up. So like I would have to learn to sit again through my meal, no interruption. So things ebb and flow, but they've always been in the playpen of, you know, abstinence. And so that's really important. No matter what we're going through, this has to be the most important thing in my life. I haven't sponsored someone in a really long time. And the past couple of years, when I've started to sponsor people, sometimes it's just not their time. But the other times, it really is my availability. And I have to say, this isn't not the most important thing in my life, but I got a real schedule that is not my own a lot of the time, right? And I have to get phone calls before 6 a.m. or at like 9 a.m., but then I live in a dead zone. So if I'm already out and they call me and they miss me, they get mad. I'm having a tough time. So I'm kind of putting it out there that I need to sponsor. I want to sponsor. And I would say 50% of the time, it's my fault it doesn't work out, right? Either the timing or me not getting back to them quick enough. Or in the other time, it's just not their time, right? But that's another thing I need to, you know, so it's like that slippery slope. It didn't work out, or was my focus and willingness not all in, right? And it's a slippery slope, because I got real good physical live reasons. These people depend on me, my home, right? But at the same time, they're not babies. They could attend to themselves a little bit, or I could be a little late for that pickup and take the, you know what I mean? So this is just about keeping the habits. And they're so important. They're so important. Weigh and measure without exception. Level the tablespoons, stuff the cups, 0.0 on the scale. I've had to do things sometimes like where I'm weighing and measuring on the road, and I have to literally go on like the sidewalk, or if I'm out in you know, you had to eat outside for so many years with the pandemic, and the tables were like on the sidewalk and crooked, and the tables were these, I would put my scale on the floor, plate on the floor. I'm like, I don't give a shit. I gotta like, oh, sorry. I gotta weigh and measure my food. So we go to any lengths to stay abstinent no matter what. And I hope you all have a beautiful abstinent next meal. And I get a lot of strength from community. So thank you for asking me to speak. Thank you for listening. And we don't eat no matter what.